Today on the Science and Art of Open Water Swimming, I'm joined by Kate Bevilaqua, a highly experienced and respected long course triathlete and coach. This conversation comes at the end of the WA Triathlon season, with Busselton 100 just around the corner, and on the same weekend as the Lake Argyle 20k swim, the final major open water swim of the WA season. It felt like the right moment to look at how swimming fits into the bigger endurance picture. Kate's career spans elite long course racing across Ironman, 70.3 and Ultraman, including wins at Busselton and an outright Ultraman victory across both men and women. Before racing professionally, she studied sports science and physical education at UWA and worked as a teacher before transitioning into full-time triathlon. She recently retired from elite racing and now coaches athletes through GK Endurance alongside her husband, Guy. Earlier this year, she was inducted into the WA Women's Hall of Fame, recognising not just her results, but her long-standing contribution to sport. In this episode, we focus on swimming in non-drafting long-course triathlon, how to approach pacing, mindset and execution when the swim isn't about winning, but about setting up the rest of the race. Kate is refreshingly open about swimming being her relative weakness, which makes her insights especially valuable for long course athletes. This is a thoughtful conversation about swimming, not in isolation, but as the first piece of a much longer puzzle. Welcome to the podcast, Kate.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. It's it's interesting that you mentioned the Lake Argyle swim. That one has always been on my bucket list. I don't want to swim Toronto, but I would do the Lake Argyle swim, except it always falls on the same weekend as Busso, so can't miss that one.
It does. Obviously, they see it as the opening of the Kimberley, the Lake Argyle swim, and Busselton as the closing of the triathlon season in WA.
Yeah, so my loyalties lie down south, unfortunately.
So before we get into a lot of detail, how would you describe the role of the swim in an event like the Busso 100?
I think the longer the event goes, most people would say the swim has less and less importance because it really doesn't equate to how much the bike distance changes or how much the run distance changes. So for an event like Busso, Busso 100 now, where the swim is 2Ks, it's still a decent distance, especially for those that are coming from a non-swimming background. And I feel like a lot of athletes new to the sport or time punched probably underestimate how much that type of distance of swim can take out of them. Yeah.
So you've said openly that swimming's never your strength. How did that shape the way you approached races?
Yeah, when I first started, I hadn't thought about it as too much. I mean, I didn't start triathlon when I was a young kid or anything like that. I wasn't doing it growing up. I got involved in it when I was at university, for a bit of fun. And then when I started taking it a little bit more seriously, I realized my swim was okay. But then when I did go professional and started racing professional racing, my first victory at Ironman Western Australia, I came out of the water like in over an hour. And I was towards the back of the pack out of the swim, and I mean, you couldn't get away with that these days. There's no way anyone's coming out of the water that far back and winning an event, but you had a little bit more time then. But I realized I had to do something about it because I was just having to work so hard and much harder than I probably should have to catch up and get back into the race, which, was wasted energy. So I realized, something had to be done. And I was lucky enough to do some work with Paul from Swim Smooth, who helped me with my swim, hopefully improving it. We did improve. We went from 102 to 55s, which is great. It was fantastic.
So do you think, being that weaker swimmer, you've obviously thought about improving your swim, but did it change the way that you might have thought about the swim and the race itself?
Definitely. I did start having like mental issues and mental anxiety about my races, and in particular the swim, because I felt like it was so bad. So that was affecting how I would go into a race and how I would start a race. And it was, I just have to get through the swim. It doesn't matter, like, don't, whatever the swim will be, rather than necessarily going into a race with confidence. over the entire day, I had developed this mindset of get out of the water, like it doesn't matter, all that sort of stuff. So I did, again, as part of that, I did end up going seeing a sports psychologist and trying to just help my mentality of how I felt about the swim, because I thought that mental aspect was affecting my physical swimming as well.
And so when you went through that process, how did that change the way you felt about racing?
It definitely helped me mentally, because I started to put together, I mean, we should have a pre-race routine and things like that already, but it made me specifically have a swim one, and I started to think about change my mentality of how I was thinking about the swim before the start, doing some different things in my swimming leading up to the race to help me, again, feel mentally more prepared for the swim. And I was, with the training I was doing and the assistance I was getting from Paul, I was getting stronger in the water. So it was more about telling myself to just be focusing on knowing where I've come from and where am at. And swimming's hard because you can put in so much time and effort and maybe get 30 seconds or maybe get a minute for hours and hours and hours of work. Whereas when it comes to cycling and running, that sort of commitment can give you 10 or 15 minutes. And so a lot of people decide, well, it's just not worth the effort for the swim. But when you're racing at the elite level, it is. But I think even for age group level in long course racing, athletes again underestimate how much a swim can take out of them and how much it will affect their bike and run if they're not swim fit. They don't have to be fast, they just have to be able to get through the swim and feel more comfortable and it not take so much out of them.
So exploring that a little bit further, how would you then define a good swim in a non-drafting long course event?
That's a tough question. Eh, I never looked at a time for a swim or went out there with the goal of holding a certain pace, because it's affected by so many outside factors. It's affected by the conditions, hot versus cold. You know, I struggle racing in cold weather. At the elite level, it's also affected, even though it's long course racing, you can draft in the swim. So, was I swimming on my own or was I able to find someone else to swim with that pushed me a little bit harder or allowed me to conserve energy? In saying that, so it did come down to how my time compared relatively to those around me, because I knew what they were capable of swimming, so I would understand, well, I should be these few minutes out of the water. That's at the elite level. But in regards to an age group or an amateur level, it is a good swim is the ability to get through it, to feel comfortable, to not have that fatigue that you've come out of the water already. Like after 2Ks, you are gassed and you're coming out of the water and feeling, wow, I've just used up so much of my energy just getting through that first part of the water. So I think for a lot of the athletes we coach, yeah, of course we'll give them a little bit of a time target, but it'll be quite a broad range for something like the swim.
So what do you think the biggest swim-related mistakes that you might see as a coach with the athletes you're working with?
Overestimating maybe ability, so how fast they can actually do the swim, and going out too hard. But maybe I feel like the change now in the wave starts or the rolling starts may have allowed athletes now to not necessarily get caught up in the start of the swim so much. So athletes tend to sprint out in maybe the first 200 or 300 meters and then totally be destroyed and be hanging on for the rest of it. I also love, if it's available, getting in a swim warm up. When we do a running race, we do a warm up. When we do a cycling race, we do a warm up. So I think it's very important to get a swim warm up in if the conditions allowed, if the race event's allowed, and if it doesn't, do like some form of dry land warm up. So when you're starting that swim in that first few 100 meters, it's not the first time your body is being exposed to those actions or you're getting your heart rate up for the first time at the beginning of the event.
So with the warm-up itself, as you mentioned, it's really important to prepare the body for the activity. How do you decide whether or not to get in the water prior?
Uh, yeah, well, I would say there's two major factors, and one is number one, if you're allowed. There are some races you go to that you are not allowed to do a swim warm up. For example, I'm in Singapore at the moment for T100. The age group athletes are not allowed to get in the water for a swim warm up because it's in the marina and it's not open. So the pros can get in the day before, they get a private session, but no, not allowed for the age group athletes. And the second thing would be the temperature and how cold it is. Sometimes if it's really, really cold and then you have to get out and you have to wait maybe 20 or 30 minutes then before your actual start time, well, then that probably defeats the purpose of you getting your warm up in, because you're going to be cold again by the time you start. So that would be the two things that would affect being able to do a warm up. Yep.
You briefly touched on the importance of the first 5 to 10 minutes in the race. How important is that to really settle into what's going to happen for the rest of the day?
Yeah, I find for me, getting that swim warm up in helps me physically and mentally. As soon as I get in for that warm up, I just find that I'm able to calm down a little bit and get away from the craziness of the start of the race and what's about to happen. I like to do a little bit of backstroke and take a few deep breaths and remember it's just a race. So the next day, life's going to be normal. Because again, at the elite level, that first 200 or 300 meters, unfortunately, in a race like Busso or anything shorter, it can determine the outcome of the rest of the race. Like if you're not on someone's feet, if you're not able to get out of the water and be around them on the bike, and then see them and have the ability to run well, all of a sudden the race dynamics have changed, and my thoughts of how I'm racing also have to change. So that first part is really fast. It's really hectic. It does settle down, and it's just about trying to hang on until it does settle down. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't.
And from an age grouper's perspective, how should they consider the start of a race?
Yeah, I don't think that age groupers should go out and sprint the first 200 or 300. I really don't think there's any need to. Now, with the rolling start, take advantage of finding the straight line, the best line that's going to get you out to the buoy and head towards it. And they have the ability to actually build into the race, build up to speed, and then trying to maintain that speed and effort for the rest of the swim. So there really shouldn't be any reason to be going out that hard and jacking the heart rate up unnecessarily. It's going to happen in Busso this year. We have the Aussie exit, and that's always, if you haven't done that before, that surprisingly takes a lot out of you to stand up, run around the beach, dive in, start swimming again, and having to settle down. So there's still plenty of time, or there's still time to get a few practice sessions in if they haven't done it yet. But I suggest doing that.
Just for clarity for some of the listeners, can you explain the difference between a rolling start and what a pack start would be?
Yeah, so for professionals and in the past, the swim start had just been a mass start. So you could have anywhere from like an age group start that might have 50 to 100 athletes to I know a couple of Ironmans that still do it, Ironman Lanzarote maybe, that have a mass start of like thousands, 1,500 all starting at once in the water. Whereas a rolling start now sends off 3 or 4 athletes every 5 to 10 seconds. So it's great because it does split up the athletes heading into the water. It does allow for that more calmer start to the swim and not so crowded, not so hectic. The only problem with that is it makes it a little bit difficult to know where you are in the field. So if you're a competitive athlete and trying to win your age group or qualify for a world slot, you don't really know who's behind you or who's in front of you, if you're chasing down. So that makes it difficult because you can cross the finish line and think, yay. And if you lost by 1 second, if you had that athlete with you in your start, of course, you probably would have sprinted to the finish line. So there's good and, there's pros and cons of both ways.
And then with that wide range of swimming abilities and wide range of athletes in a triathlon, where should athletes consider positioning themselves at the start then?
Yeah, my advice is to watch the elites or watch the professionals. So I must admit that obviously the pro women always go after the pro men, and a few of us will always stand there and we'll be like, okay, cool, let's see what the men are doing. In terms of, we would have had a practice swim or we would have had a hot warm up swim, so hopefully on the course. So we would have been able to check, number one, what the conditions are like, but if there is a sandbank, does the water dip off? Is there a current that's pushing you one way? A lot of the time we do see in Busso, depending on the time of the year, athletes will start off far, heading into the water far left because they can run a little bit more there because it's shallow before they have to start swimming. So more dolphin diving before swimming. So there's a lot of things to consider, but if you have the opportunity to be down there early, you can always learn from the best in the sport. That would be the first thing. And the second thing is checking out that area where the swim's going to be held before it starts. The other thing to consider is side that you prominently breathe on. I'm lucky I breathe both sides, left and right, so I'm bilateral, no worries. But if you're if you only breathe to the right, then you want to probably start on the far left hand side. So you're keeping those boys on your right hand side, you're keeping the majority of people on your right hand side. It's easier for you to head in a straight line. Whereas if you're breathing to the left, if you started on the left hand side, the chances of you going off course and having to swim more is a lot more likely. So breathe to the right, start on the left, breathe to the left, start on the right.
So even with a rolling start, there are still going to be times where there's going to be some congestion or contact with other swimmers. How do you stay calm in those situations?
For me, I actually have to focus on breathing out under the water. I think if I start to panic and then I lift my head up and I try and I'm breathing out of the water, then start to swallow a little bit more water, and then I start to, I've had panic attacks in the water before, and from cold conditions or from just that happening, from water coming into my mouth, from me not, just panicking. But I find if I actually focus on breathing out under the water, and sometimes I even count, or sometimes I make a little bit of a noise, it's a little bit longer than normal, but it calms me down. So I'm able to get away from what's going on around me. And number two, the rolling start should be a lot of clear water. So if you have to just stop and move aside or find a new position, you should have the opportunity to do that in the rolling start, because it's not going to be as crowded.
You previously just mentioned knowing the course and what side you breathe on. How much attention should athletes really give to navigation?
Uh, Probably more than they usually do. I mean, no one wants to swim any further than they should. And I've been in events recently where I've been lucky enough to be swimming with some people and looking up and thinking, oh my gosh, where are they going? Like, they're going left and the boys to the right. So I think that it's not difficult to do, but it's a skill that needs to be trained, and it can be trained in the swimming pool, just with simple skills like polo drills and things like that. I mean, getting yourself into the habit or into a rhythm of looking up every now and then, but not lifting your head too high so that you're dragging your lower legs in the water and slowing yourself down. But like anything, it's another skill that athletes can work on and get in the open water and practice.
How often should they be lifting their head to look where they're going?
I'd say that's a personal choice, and it depends on how often the boys are. Are the boys really close? Are they spread out far apart so you can't really see the next one? Do you have a few people around you? So hoping, fingers crossed, that they're swimming in a straight line and you don't necessarily need to be looking up to the boy because you're trusting them or not. But I would be looking up. I have a weird breathing pattern. I swim 2 strokes to the left, then 3 strokes, 2 strokes to the right, then 3 strokes. That tends to be my pattern in an event. And I would probably look up every anywhere from 6 to 8 strokes, depending on where I am on the course. And again, like I said, if I can see the boy and it's very easy to see, not as often, but most of the time it's that regular.
Within triathlon, we do have the option sometimes to wear a wetsuit.
hmm
How much of an impact might that have on the outcomes of a swim, whether that be physical or psychological?
I think everyone swims faster in a wetsuit. Like it's a wetsuit is faster. It's faster, if this is like the correct way to English way to say it. It's more faster for those that don't swim as well. So those that struggle in the swim, they're going to get much higher gains than someone who is already a very good swimmer. For example, someone like my husband, Guy, who swims well, the gains he can get in a wetsuit compared to a beginner swimmer who might swim 2 minutes, 2 or 2:30 minutes per 100 meters, they're going to gain a lot more time wise. So when an event is wetsuit optional, athletes should always wear a wetsuit. If they have one, it's going to help for sure. It also helps with temperature if it's cold, conserving energy. You're not having to swim as hard. So that allows you then to bike and run much more to your full potential than if you didn't have a wetsuit on and had to work harder.
And in terms of wearing a wetsuit, does it change what you might wear underneath?
That's a very interesting question, and different for everyone. It's an individual thing. We know a couple of like professional athletes who have worn their suit up under their wetsuit and then worn their suit down, and they don't swim as well with the suit up. Like, it's a personal preference, but they really struggle, no matter what suit it is, to swim with the suit up underneath the wetsuit due to that, just that extra layer of constriction on the shoulders. So we'll choose to swim with the wetsuit down, so they can swim faster. So if you have a wetsuit and you have a suit that goes up over your shoulders, it's something that's definitely worth practicing to see what the feel is like and how your body responds. And look, we do that in the pool. We don't necessarily go to the open water. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to do that. It's time constraints. So often I'll wear my wetsuit in the pool leading into a race, and just make sure I rinse it out in the shower, or, with some fresh water after, to make sure I'm prepared. But yeah, make sure you practice both ways: suit up, suit down, and see what feels more comfortable and allows you to swim faster.
Now, when we talk about the swim to bike transition, athletes might underestimate the impact moving from one activity to the next. Are there any small transition habits that might assist in that transition?
Practice. Definitely. And as you just brought up, it depends whether you have your suit up or suit down. I am one of those athletes, unfortunately, that cannot seem to swim with the suit up. I'm trying, I'm attempting to get better at it, but I don't know if it's just where I've come from with my background of swimming. But I just need to feel comfortable before anything else. And so that means I am most of the time struggling to pull my suit up in the wet to come into transition. I'm hoping that'll change over time, but again, I'll have to practice that. And as soon as you get out of the water, you want to take your goggles off and put them on the top of your cap, but you don't want to take them off and have them in your hand, because if they're in your hand, it restricts you from being able to do other things while you're running to transition. So goggles are off onto your head so that you can see where you're going. But the immediate thing you want to do is to be start getting your wetsuit off and pulling your arms out and getting it down at least to your waist by the time you get to the bike. There's two reasons. Number one is, the more wet the wetsuit is, the easier it is to get off. So if you can do that straight away, you're going to get it slide down as far as you can to the waist. And then once you get to your bike, it's easy to throw your cap and goggles off and put them straight down and continue with taking the wetsuit off the rest of the time. So it's having a routine in your head that as soon as you get out of the water, goggles to your head, and then start removing as much as you can as you're running to your bike.
So I'm just thinking about race nutrition. You're in the water for half an hour or so. In terms of pre-race and then coming to transitions, where does nutrition fit into that plan?
Yep. So I will have a gel or something similar. It may be a gel or it may be a chew, but something around that 30 grams of carb top up, literally 10 to 15 minutes before race start. So always go down to race start with a gel or a chew and a bottle of water, and I'm having that up until starting. Then with an event like the 2K swim, or Busso 100 in particular, I won't have anything in nutrition. And I'll also wait for the first part of the bike because it's a little bit chaotic. So coming out of transition, getting onto your bike at the mountain line, people tend to go out way too hard in the first 3 to 5Ks. The heart rate's jacked up, the intensity's there. So it takes a little time to settle down. So I tend to wait until I've reached that point, and then I'll start my nutrition on the bike after that first 3 to 5Ks.
Now that you're coaching, what do you notice most about how athletes are approaching the swim?
To be honest, the general consensus, I would say, with the majority of them, is they really don't care about the swim. But you'll try and get them in the water once a week, and you'll say, look, if you can swim twice, you can maintain. If you want to get better in the water, we need to try and get 3 times a week in. But it is just that mentality of, oh, but I swim 3 times a week. I have to drive to the pool. I have to spend all the time in the pool. I have to shower after the pool. And what am I doing that for? Like 60 to 90 seconds worth of improvement when I can be doing other things. But it's not just that. Like, we have noticed as well that athletes that do an FTP test fresh, their results compared to an FTP test that they do after maybe a swim session in the morning, they can't ride as well. Like, they just can't. The power numbers are down. So the ability to back up after that swim is affecting their potential on the bike. So it's trying to encourage them that. But I feel the general mentality with swimming is if anyone's going to miss anything, it's going to be a swim.
Is there anything you wish you understood more about swimming when you first started triathlon 30 years ago?
uh, I think the biggest thing for me was just trying to, number one, in try and enjoy it. Like I think it was going to the pool and expecting to see gains all the time or expecting to see improvements all the time, and it doesn't work like that. And when the bike volume picks up or when the run volume picks up, my swimming in the pool tends to go down because it suffers when I'm under fatigue more than anything else. It seems my swimming does. So that it would have been more about not overthinking it too much and realizing sometimes you just got to turn up and you just got to get the work done and not overthink it and not analyze it. Like the main thing is that you keep ticking the boxes. And number two was yes, swimming is highly technique based, but there are lots of techniques. And sometimes, especially if you're an adult swimmer, it is good to work with what you've got. And that's where Paul, in Swim and Smooth is very good. I have such a high turnover, so I was considered a swinger. And it wasn't about you need to slow down your stroke and you need to be doing distance per stroke because I would be going backwards. Like that's not going to work for me. So it was about how could we work with what I had and be better at doing that. And also, I think with a lot of our adults, they're afraid to be using pool boy too much or they're afraid to be using floaty pants. But the reality is if they're training for a triathlon, majority of the time they're wearing a wetsuit. There are very few times, unless you race in Asian countries and things like that, but you can still wear a speed suit. So they will be wearing a wetsuit. So if that's going to help them spend more time in the water and feel more confident in the water, then I'll be like, hey, you wear that pool boy. Like we want you to swim rather than not swimming. So it depends on the individual that you're working with, but there was a few things that I think have changed over time.
Do you think being a weaker swimmer makes some athletes better long course races?
Yeah, the cyclists and the runners. But like I think that I never raced short course. Like I was never an elite short course athlete. I did some as an age grouper, but Andrew Budge was my coach at the time, and he quite often would tell me that I didn't have very many fast twitch fibers and was trying to get me to go long course for a few years. And I always said, no, that's crazy. But yeah, I do see they have the ability to make up the time on the bike and the run. So it allows them that time that they lose in the swim. It's not such a big deal. And there are some elite athletes that are like that. Not as many now, I don't feel. But someone like Danielle Lewis from the US, out of the water most of the time over an hour. But one of the fastest cyclists and one of the fastest runners on the professional women's circuit, winning Ironmans, unless she's against those top 10 women in the world who you just can't make up the time. So it's quite common to see that, which is, it's fine. The sport's made for people find what distance suits them better.
So I just want to finish off with some easier ones. What is your favourite swim set and why?
I am definitely more of a strength endurance athlete. So strength endurance is our session on a Monday. Monday we do strength endurance after a big weekend of training. So I like something like a 400 meters pull paddles and band, and then 5 2s like pull. The whole set's pull paddles and band or pull, and then 400 4 2s, 400 3 2s, 400 2 2. So it's all pure strength. And on that, I'm like, oh yeah, cool, that's good. There's no intensity in it. I can do that any day of the week.
When you're swimming, do you count, do you sing, or do you focus on something externally?
um, Most of the time, I count. So in a training session, I will count laps, and that could be we swim in a 50-meter pool, but sometimes it'll be 25s depending on like if it's a hard 200, I'll count 25s because it's really hard. I don't sing, but no counting. If part of the session is me practicing some drafting, then I don't have to worry because all I'm focusing on is trying to hang on to the feet, and my turns are not the quickest. So I tend to always lose the feet in a turn. So I know I have to work hard getting off the turn for like 10 to 12 strokes to get back on. So that covers me for that part. In a race, it depends if I'm find myself with other people, which I always like, but doesn't happen very often. Again, it'll be like, can I sit on the feet for as long as I can? Are we heading in a straight line? Where's the next boy? I may count then, but I'll only count up to like 40 or 50, and then I'll reset again. And I'll keep doing that until we get to the next boy, turn around, start again. So counting is something that I'll tend to do a little bit. Haven't got into the singing part yet, though.
Post race, in that 24 to 48 hours, an event like Busselton, we're ready for the party.
Mm.
What do you see as an important component of recovery after an event?
There's multiple, but movement's one of them. And people don't want to, or they're like, oh, the season's over. And I guess it depends if you have another event coming up. But immediately, recovery for me looks like, I mean, even after a normal training session, looks like a protein shake or a protein drink. It'll be time in the recovery boots. It'll be getting a good night's sleep, which usually doesn't happen after Busso 100. That normally sleeps out the window on that night. But we will definitely move on the Monday, whether that's a swim or a ride. I find that you need to get the blood flowing. It doesn't need to be hard, it just needs to be easy, but it's very important. The sooner you do that, the better. The longer you leave it, the stiffer you feel. Especially the older you are, like you need to move. Like your body doesn't recover like it used to when you're younger. And if you want to be doing the right thing, that's going to help you mentally and physically. Yeah.
And if you had one swim takeaway for the Busso 100 athletes, what would it be?
Mm, get in and warm up. Yeah, I mean, it's normally cool in the morning, but not normally so cold that I would say no, don't get in the water. We've had a few years where the actual water temperature was warmer than the air temperature, but hopefully, get in and do even just 3 to 5 minutes is plenty. Roll your arms over, and then get out and take a look at where those first two waves of athletes are heading out on the course. The elite men and women, see which direction they're going, and hopefully they're setting a good example for you and you'll be able to follow that.
And if people are interested in being coached by you and Guy, where can they find you?
gkendurance.com website, you can see there we have a group of coaches that are on the page. You can reach out there. There's an email address to contact us, and we'll help you out if you're interested.
I'll make sure I've got that link in the show notes as well. And finally, is there anything else that you'd like to mention that we might not have covered today?
I believe triathlon is a lifestyle sport. And I know as coaches, we see a lot of people who come on board and they come on board for 6 months or 1 year, and it's I've done my goal event and that's it. But the majority of our athletes are in it for the lifestyle, especially living in Perth. It's a great lifestyle. Our mornings are fantastic. The summers are great. We have so many amazing events to choose from, and it's a great community. So I'm sure listeners are probably already involved in triathlon, but if they're not, give it a go, because I guarantee you'll enjoy it and want to come back and do more.
Kate, thank you very much for taking time out of your day. Really appreciate you sharing your knowledge, your expertise with our listeners.
Thank you, Eve. Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this conversation with Kate, take a moment to think about how you approach the swim, not just in terms of speed, but how it sets you up for the rest of the race. If you found this episode useful, please consider following the podcast, sharing it with a training partner, or leaving a short review. It really helps others find the show. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. If you're interested in working with Kate, please find links to GK Endurance in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the water.